today we are going to revise the lesson, that is the last lesson written by Alfred Dewdney. First of all, we get the introduction of the writer. Alfred Dewdney write this story during the Franco-Prussian War, in which France got defeated by Prussia. Bismarck was the leader, and the French district Alsace and Lorraine went in the hand of Prussia. It showcased the fact that the oppressor wants not only territory but also dominate over the language culture of a particular country. It means the oppressor or the winner, the Prussia, did not want only to capture the area, district, and a country of France, but also they had made their mind to get capture their language and culture too. It means they wanted to abolish their languages and cultures also. So we start the story. The story start with a small child whose name was French. French had not prepared his lesson, sees a crowd in front of the bulletin board. The author was late for school and dreaded scolding from the teacher Mr. M. Hamel, who was to question them that day on participles. French was ready to go to school, but he was afraid of because his teacher Mr. M. Hamel had given some homework on participles and the narrator had not learned this lesson. It was a bright day and he felt tempted to stay back from school and enjoy the day, but somehow he resisted the temptation to do so. First, he tried and planned that he was not going to attend the class of Mr. Hamel because he was going to scold him for not preparing his task, and he wanted to spend his day outside. But at the end, he decided that it would be better for him to go and attend his class. While he was passing by the town hall, he saw a crowd in front of the bulletin board. When he was in the way of his school, he started his journey to reach the school because he had decided that he was not going to pass his time at any cost and he was going to attend his school. In the way, he found that near the town hall, a lot of the people had gathered. A great crowd was near the bulletin board. Board was the board where all types of news regarding the district and government orders, etc. used to published. Even the news related with the war, defeated or won, all the news were used to flash on the bulletin board for the local people. Since the war was on, all the bad news had come from the board. But it was the that bulletin board was not good and favor of the people of that area because each and every bad news regarding the war came on that bulletin board. As he was hurrying past, the blacksmith called out to him and said there was a plenty of time to reach the school in time. Now, friends, without taking care and without staying and knowing what was going on there, he just hurried to school because he was getting late and he has fear with Mr. Hamel. So he started his journey. On this, blacksmith called and told him that he had plenty of time to reach the school. He should not be worried and he should not be hurried too. But friends thought that blacksmith was joking with him. He was playing trick with him. To his surprise, his teacher is kind to him. On that day, something different took place. When the author reached school, he was very surprised at the very silence, the surrounding, the school. It seemed more like a Sunday than a working day. Usually, it was found that during the school time, the school had a lot of commotions, repeating, reciting of the lessons, thumping the rulers on the desk by the teacher, or the different types of commotion could be heard. But on that day, it was totally strange. It was appearing just like the Sunday or holy day of the school. Everything was very silence. He had depended on the commotion to enter the class unnoticed, but to his surprise, everyone already in their place and he had to go before everybody. In the way, French had decided in with the help of that commotion, the when the children will be engaged in their work and they will be creating sound, he could easily reach in the class without getting noticed by his teacher. But the situation was totally different, so he had to go in front of his teacher after getting the permission from him. What surprised him even more was that instead of scolding him, the teacher was kind and told him to take his place. But on that day, his expectation and what he had guessed what was going to happen with him, in reality it didn't take place. It means teacher without scolding him allowed him to enter in the school, and this was the big cause of surprise for French. Why the teacher didn't scold him? After sitting the narrator, French noticed that the teacher was wearing his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and his little black silk cap with the embroidery on it. This attire was worn by Mr. Hamel only on inspection and prize days. After getting the surprise with the behavior of the teacher, another surprise was waiting for him. When the friends took his place, he noticed that his teacher was in his very beautiful green coat and a special dress that he used to wear on the special days. He had worn his green coat, frilled shirt, and little black silk cap with embroidery on it. Usually, he used to wear these dresses on days of inspection and prize distribution day. But that was not the special day. Why he had worn that dress? It was the matter of surprise for him. The atmosphere that day was very solemn, and what surprised him most was when he saw the village elder sitting in the class on the last benches. He found when he saw the backward on the last benches, he found that the old villagers were also sitting in the class. They all were very silent, and everybody was just staring at Mr. Himmel. Everyone was sad. One of the persons sitting there was old Hauser, who had even brought an old primer which he thumped at the edge. He held it open his knees, and the old Hauser had came with his a small table which is used to keep the sacred books. He had opened near his legs and on his knees and kept his book too. The narrator wondered at the changes when suddenly Mr. Hamel mounted his chair and announced that it was their last French lesson, as the order had come from Berlin that only the German will be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. When the French was in surprise and thinking about all these matters, suddenly Mr. Hamel took his seat and announced that it was his last lesson and it will be the last lesson of French languages too, because it was the order which has come from Berlin that the German will be taught only in Alsace and Lorraine. Except that language, there will be no any French language be taught. The narrator was shocked to hear this, and suddenly those books which had seemed a burden become very dear to him. In beginning, French was thinking the grammar book of French were very heavy and uninteresting book. But after listening this sentence, the all books were started appearing dearer to him. He regretted not having learnt his lesson, and what he had done in his previous class, he started repenting, and he was thinking that why he did not learn that French language seriously. Now the narrator understood why Mr. Hamel had put on his Sunday clothes and why the villagers were attending the class that day. Now everything was clear in front of him. He was able to understand that it was the last class of Mr. Hamel, and that is why the village people had arrived and all were appearing in the mood of sorrow. All were appearing with the unhappy faces. It was their way of thanking the master of his commendable services of 40 years and showing the respect to their country. In this way, they all were showing their respect because Mr. Hamel had served that place for 40 years and now he was going forever. So the all village people were showing their respect, and they were there to bid him bye. They also regretted missing the school so often. Now all were started repenting and missing that how After that day, they could not come to the school. When the class started, the narrator heard his name being called out to recite the first word. He felt very disgusted with himself at his failure to do so. When the class started, Mr. Hamel first asked the rule of participle to friends, but that fellow was unable to speak and he was feeling very shy. He felt very disgusted with himself of a failure to so. Mr. Hamel said he won't scold him for he was as it is feeling so bad about it. On this, Mr. Hamel was not in mood of scolding him because he knew that the child himself was feeling very bad for his act. Everyday learning had been postponed to the next day, and now there was a time left to learn. Now, every day the friends used to think that next day he will learn, next day he will learn, and now the time has arrived. There is no any time left to next day. He further said that they would be mocked by the people by calling themselves friends, although they couldn't speak or write their own language. And Mr. Hamel reminded them that the people will make the fun to hear them. They will call them French and call them that they were calling themselves the French and they will not able to write and learn the French language, speak the French language. Further, Mr. Hamel says even many parents had preferred to send their children to work than school. Then he confessed that too was to blame because many times he had given the holidays when he wanted to go for fishing. On this, Mr. Hamel tried to uh, poke the all children that Mr. Hamel had never went on leave for their own entertainment except teaching the French language. And even the few parents used to send their children for the work instead of studying. But Mr. Hamel never tried to bunk the school or never tried to give them leave and go for the fishing or enjoy his days. He always tried his best to teach them French. Mr. Hamel said that French was the most beautiful language in the world. It was the most clearest and logical. He then opened the book and explained a grammar lesson to them. He started teaching the lesson to the students, and at the end, the friends found that it was very easy for him to understand each and everything taught by Mr. Hamel. On that day, he was unable to know how he understood all the things what the Mr. Hamel had taught. Before that day, he was unable to learn. He was thinking whether on that day he had given his 100% concentration, or on that day Mr. Hamel had taught in the such a way that it became very easy for him to understand. But he found that it was his concentration. Now he was thinking that it was his last lesson, and that is why he had concentrated on the lesson and he was able to understand the French language, which was appearing very hard. Today it was appearing very easy. While the class was doing the writing assignment, Mr. Hamel was sat motionless in the chair. All the students were busy in their work, and at that duration in that period, Mr. Hamel was sitting and staring on the each and every objects which were present in the class. He wanted to keep the picture of each and every object before in his mind and in his eyes before leaving that place and this school, because it has the great memory for him. He had spent a lot of time in that place and he didn't want to forget it forever. Now the time was over and the class was going to over. On this, Mr. Hamel just stood up. He wanted to speak something, but he was unable to speak. In his neck got choked. He was unable to speak, and just he wrote "Vive la France." It means a long live France. And then he leaned against the wall and dismissed the class with the gesture. After that, he leaned his head, taking the support with the wall, and just indicated with his finger that the student could go now. And now Mr. Hamel could be seen that he was too much worried. He was unable to bear and think this.